Well, my name is Sten Söderberg, and I'm recently retired from the Swedish Research Council in Stockholm, Sweden. And first of all, I want to thank you and the organizers very much for inviting me here and for taking an interest in our experiences in Sweden. I know Paula has been talking about a small country in the southern Europe, and Sweden is in the same situation, but in the north of Europe. So I'm both proud and flattered to be invited here, and I hope our experiences can be of some use to you as well. Being recently retired, I should also say that I don't represent anyone but myself in this position. I don't represent Sweden as a country, I don't represent the Swedish government or the Swedish Research Council, but of course I will draw on my experiences from the Council and the Swedish impact agenda, if I should use that word. Okay, there you go. I won't go very much into the organization and tasks of the Research Council, just to say that I don't know really the situation in Catalonia, but the Swedish Research Council, which is the main public funding body for basic research in Sweden, has the status of an independent authority under the Ministry for Education and Research. It's not part of the ministry. We are, or they are, an independent agency, and in that capacity should have its own opinion, and etc. Besides being the main funder, the Council also has two other important tasks. One is to be has the main responsibility in our country for communication on research and research policy. And third but not least, we are responsible for being the advisor on research policy issues to the Swedish government. And that includes a lot of tasks, among them assessment and evaluation, bibliometrics, etc. And also to introduce something about the concepts of societal impact of research, so that make sure that we're talking about the same thing, or at least that you understand what I am talking about. So, and these are our definitions that we have tried to make clear within the Council, that by societal impact of research we mean impact beyond academia rather than impact within academia. Like citations is the most common indicator for impact within academia. Secondly, impact for us is not the same as cooperation and partnerships between research and industry, for example. It's not the same thing, although impact normally presupposes different forms of cooperation between society and research. Thirdly, impact is not the same as outreach or research communication, the process of transferring knowledge from research community to society. Impact normally also presupposes outreach activities, research communication activities, but it's not the same thing. And fourth, I would like to say also that we try to distinguish impact from relevance. Relevance is an ex ante judgment, that is judging the relevance of ongoing research, what might be useful. Maybe one could say that relevance is more or less the same as potential impact. So these are the terms that how we use them. Well, how has the impact agenda been and the Swedish Research Council been together, so to say? Well, I was recruited to the Swedish Research Council about 10 years ago, and I was one of those guys whose task was to establish a professional evaluation function within the council. Am I speaking too low, or do you hear me? Yeah, fine. time, thanks. Just yell if you don't hear me. Yeah. So during these 10 years that I've been, and of course a lot of other colleagues have been at the Council, it has not been, impact assessment has not been a part of the daily agenda in evaluations of research. Neither ex ante in terms of relevance assessment or ex post in terms of impact assessment. But there has been a growing interest for impact assessment all over, I should say, in several countries all around the world, in European level, on a national political level in Sweden, at different public research funding bodies in our country, and not least locally at different universities and university colleges. So it goes on many different levels at the same time. And I don't think I need any more here to develop the motives for this development, because the two former speakers I thought talked very well about this, the motives for this impact agenda to being introduced. We have adopted, the Council has adopted at least more or less official definition, which I think those of you who know the Research Excellence Framework would recognize a lot of it from there. I'm not sure that it's exactly the same wording, but it's similar. Our definition is that societal impact are the effects of research beyond the academia, which in some context and over time could amount to concrete influence on society by the application of research results, so to achieve social, economic, environmental, or cultural effects, all kinds of effects. Secondly, what I'm going to speak about here today is I would like to declare that the starting point for my experience is quite pragmatic. It's practice-based. We have done these things, and we have these failures, and we have these success stories, rather than being from an academic point of view, if I may say so. During the last years, we had a number of proposals and initiatives from the Swedish Research Council, and I will tell you more about some of those shortly. In 2012, we made a pilot study where this was the first attempt that I can remember, really, 2011, 2012, where we had the task of assessing a research program in criminology. And it consisted of two parts: a more traditional scientific evaluation of the quality of the research in this program, and also we did a pilot study on the impact assessment of that program. And if the time is enough, I come back to that as well. We also have been active in the discussion on impact assessment in a European context, both in the Horizon 2020 discussions and our position there, and as Jordi well knows, in the Science Europe Working Group for Evaluation, which was quite a debate there, really. So these are the experiences that I'm starting from. Some words of what we have learned to call the Swedish problems. I don't know really if you see the small letters here, but basically what this figure shows is the small figure in the middle, which is quite a yellowish. That's the OECD mean, and the blue one is the blue line is average value for the 5 top countries in the OECD, and Sweden is red. And what we can see here is basically that for all these indicators, Sweden is very much on top, in line with the top in OECD in terms of input. That is industry-financed research, government-funded research, the total number of publications, and the total number of researchers per capita, so to say. But there is one point where the red line lies below the blue line, and that is citations impact. So basically we have a productivity problem. The Swedish problem is, we can say that we put a lot of funding and a lot of people into research, innovation, and we publish a lot, and there are a lot of people working, but we don't get enough quality out of it. So this, of course, has stirred quite a political debate in our country. I will not make any comparisons with Catalonia, but this is the starting point for the debate in Sweden on assessment of research, including impact assessment. So this leads to what has been the political solution, the political answer to this productivity problem. Well, it has been that I think all over the political system, performance-based research funding, PBRF, has been seen as a driver of quality. If you reward some research in terms of quality, you will raise quality. That's a basic assumption. The same basic assumption as in the Research Excellence Framework, for example. As far as I know, we have performance-based research funding in all Nordic countries today. I'm not really sure about Iceland, but I'm sure about Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, and I think in Finland as well, some sort of performance-based research funding system. These systems are also, as far as I know, all indicator-based and numeric. And they do not include societal impact. They're based on bibliometric and economic figures. And the position of the Swedish Research Council during this debate has been that if you want a good performance-based research funding system, it's better to base it on a peer review-based system rather than indicator-based system. So, and the reasons for this, in short, are that the Council thinks that this gives a more nuanced assessment. It allows to inclusion of all research areas, from the arts and humanities to medicine and STEM. It's a good system for discovering pockets of excellence all over the country in all kinds of research. And it also allows for including impact assessment if you think that impact assessment is a good way to go. Yes. So and we have had from this position, we have quite a lot of contacts, not least, of course, with the UK and the Research Excellence Framework, but also with Australia, with Excellence for Research in Australia, I think it's called, and they have recently added an engagement and impact module to that system. And also with the Netherlands and the Standard Evaluation Protocol. It's not up to me here to go very much into these systems. All I can say that they are different in how they operate. They're all based on peer review, but the degree of funding following these assessments is very much varying. In the Netherlands, there's no funding at all connected with the system, and Australia has recently skipped the funding part of the system. But the common thing which is interesting here, I think, and for us at the Research Council, is that all these systems, in one way or another, nowadays include impact assessment. So they're well worth looking into, all three of them, not just the REF. I thought in this group of people, I should also say maybe something about the policy context in Sweden, which may be particular, but and this very much is my own interpretation. Don't quote me on this. You can quote me, but don't quote Sweden. But we had a conservative-led government and a conservative-based research policy from 2008 to 2014. This government was very much in favor of a performance-based research funding system, and which should be peer review based. And this government was very interested in the UK model. From 2014, we now still have a Labour-led government and a Labour-led research policy. They are also in favor of a performance-based research funding system. I think all parties are, more or less, but they are not in favor of a peer review-based system. They are based on an indicator-based system for distributing some part of the block grant, and for the rest of the evaluation system, based on a system based on universities' self-evaluations rather than a central solution. But as I said, there is a political consensus, that's my view, on the need to connect more research and society. But it takes different forms. So my hypothesis, and this might be very personal, is that conservative political parties are more in favor of peer review-based system. And the criticism of this is that peer review-based is supposed to support the really big, those already big and beautiful and have all the money. And Labour-based research policy and more in favor of indicator-based systems, which gives everyone an equal chance with no subjective measures, etc. So when it comes to impact assessment, the follow-up to this hypothesis is that conservatives might be more in favor of a UK-based system, so to say, peer review-based system, which is in line with their research policy thinking overall, and Labour-led, a socialist-led government is more in favor of indicators, and mostly talking about indicators of cooperation rather than indicators of impact as such. So now we have a general election coming up in September, and who can predict the political situation in Sweden? It's not the same as in Catalonia at all, but it's very unstable. It's also in Sweden, if I say so. So we don't really know what will happen. No. It's up to you to make the comparisons. Yeah. So this means things can change, or they may remain stable. We don't know. So finally, I get to actually what are these models that we have been working with? Well, from the background I've told you about, both the two proposals that I've been managing and working with are performance-based research funding models that follows from the commissions we have got from the Swedish government. And I think that one which is most well known abroad is the FOKUS model, which has been called a Swedish REF. I don't really think that's appropriate, but it has been known, and several countries have expressed interest in what I've been doing in this model. So basically, this FOKUS proposal, which we delivered in 2014, is a model for allocating funding to universities and university colleges. It involves peer review of research quality and societal relevance. It enables resource funding allocation so that quality and performance are rewarded. And this was, as I said, not adopted by the Swedish government. This is paperwork, so far anyway. Yeah. On the other hand, we also have a reasonably similar proposal for evaluation of what is called ALF-funded. That is basically all clinical research in Sweden, which has a particular special funding stream. And this has to do with that healthcare is a regional responsibility, not a state responsibility in our country. So the funding stream for clinical research is quite different. This model actually came before the FOKUS model, and so they build very much on each other. And this model was presented by me to the Swedish government in September 2013, and it has been adopted, decided, and is now being implemented, and actually on the 31st of March we delivered the report to the Swedish government. So you basically can say we have tried to do this thing in two ways: focus for all Swedish research and ALF model for clinical research. One was a failure and one was a success, and the reasons for that are very much political, as I see it. That's what I was trying to tell you. Both these models, the basis for them is, surprise, surprise, that they're based on peer review, expert review of panels of national or Nordic experts. And now I'm talking just about the impact part of the models, of Nordic or national experts with experience from societal use and application of research funding. Distinguish it from the REF is we have proposed and working with special panels for impact assessment, not the same panels that have been used for quality assessment. There is a slight difference in the material that the experts have been using for their assessment between two models. One is what I could maybe easily call the British model, which is based on impact case studies, complemented by self-evaluations and explanations of impact strategy, etc. And the ALF is the opposite. The ALF model is the opposite. It's what I could slightly call the Dutch model, which is more the ground are self-evaluations, descriptions, and these are complemented by impact case studies if it's feasible. In both models, there is no, it's not prohibited to use indicators. Indicators can be used and should be used as part of the material, but only as part of the self-evaluation and the case studies. And how much and what kind of indicators are being used can vary between the research fields. And our position has also been that indicators should not directly inform funding. What informs funding is the outcome of the expert view exercise. If I don't make myself understood, please tell me. The FOKUS proposal, which I remind you never has come into reality so far anyway, looks like this. Of the block grant, 70%. First of all, we proposed that 20% of the Swedish block grant from the government to research should be based on these assessments. Of these 20%, 70% should be based on scientific quality assessment, 15% on impact outside academia and impact, and the rest 15% should be based on what we call quality enhancing factors, different factors, several factors from cooperation to gender equality, etc. Mobility was one of them. And this quality enhancing factor module of the model is much more indicator based than the impact module in the proposal. And this model proposed that all research, all kinds of research, should be evaluated in a cohesive way at the same time every 6 years. And for this session here, I've gone through once again briefly the statistics of the consultation, from the consultation to FOKUS. As I said, the proposal it was commissioned to us by a conservative government, but it was delivered to a socialist government. And and the socialist government arranged a consultation. It was not us that arranged the consultation, it was the government. It was an official consultation. And from the university sector, I could say, we have around 45 universities and university colleges in the country. And there was a strong negative response to the model overall. They didn't want the central level to mess with their business, so to say. On the impact element of the proposal, it was much more positive than negative. I go into that a bit more. We had 81 responses in all at the consultation, and of those, around half, 52%, commented on the impact assessment proposal, and the others made no comments, so it's not possible really to say what was the general opinion there. 1/3 of all 81 responses are positive to impact assessment, 10% are negative, and a few give more neutral comments. And I give you here some examples of the most frequent or interesting comments to our proposal concerning impact assessment. 11 responses was that the weighting should be too low. It should be the same as in the UK, 20% at least. And you can maybe guess from what parts of society that those kind of responses came. A lot from industry and industrial organizations, etc. 9 responses, about the same of all the 80 responses, protested against the case study methodology. It was burdensome, expensive, complicated, etc. Too much work. And then came one thing that probably the one that surprised me the most, is that only one response took up the fact or the opinion that impact assessment can restrict academic freedom. And we can lead to undesired steering effects on what kind of research is being done, etc. Personally, I would have expected considerably more than one negative response with this kind of argument, because this is a very frequent argument against impact assessment. I don't know if you recognize it here, but two responses also took up, which is a very serious problem with impact assessment, is the attribution problem. How do you really attribute the impact, the effect, to a certain piece of research being done? And then there were some other kind of responses. Two of them wanted to complement the proposal or to include more indicators of impact assessment. One response wanted to include impact on university education, which is something you can discuss whether it should be included or not. And one of them wanted the model also to include indicators of industrial funding. So if I have the time, I can say a little bit more just about this part of the proposal which regards impact, societal impact. And please, once again, remember that this has not been this has not come to be. All research was to be classified in 24 research areas. One example is economics, and 5 research fields. So economics is a research area within the research field of social sciences. And we proposed that, at least initially, the assessment of impact should be based on research field level, not on research area level. We proposed 2 case studies per 50 full-time employees. You can see for yourself there. And this proposal for Swedish country led to an estimated total of around 930 impact case studies. That should be the outcome, which can be compared to the Research Excellence Framework, which I think has around 7,000 impact case studies. We also proposed that this should be complemented by an impact statement, a description, And we, like I said, we proposed a separate panel for impact outside academia and the quality enhancing factors, and not the same panel as for research quality. Then I think my time is running out, so I won't at this point go so much into the ALF model, which is reasonably similar, but this model has been you can see here it's 50 for scientific quality, 25% and 25% for the other two parts. This has been recently we have done this thing, and it was delivered on last day in March this year. So far we had no meta-evaluation performed, which is natural of the evaluation, but we have the general feedback that I have seen, and I have, since then I've retired, so I'm not sure I have heard everything, but the general response to the impact part of the evaluation was, like you see here, it works. It has been able to do it. The model gives a limited number of good and instructive examples where one research group can learn from other more successful research groups. It's part of a learning process. This is the first time it has been done. And the most frequent critique that I have been heard so far is that the Council obviously has been too vague in providing criteria for the selection of impact cases. So there's more to be done there, and there's need probably for improvement of the guidelines. So, and I think I've sent the case studies to Paula, so they are available for anyone who's interested in using them for studying. Yeah. And I skip a lot of things here. Just to round off what I'm going to say, two things. What we have learned from this 10-year trip, so to say, is there are a number of issues which I think are well known to you as well, which are you must face. You must consider these when you're up to impact assessment. One, of course, is the time frame. What is a reasonable time frame between cause and effect? Another is the attribution problem. What effects can be attributed really to one certain piece of research? I know that in HEFCA in the UK have been discussing of taking away the element of underpinning research, or the concept of underpinning research, and substituting it with the concept of contributing research instead. I don't know if that actually will be in the next ref, but anyway. You can also discuss whether impact should be seen as the effect of a specific research activity, or more as a body of work for a large part of the university, for example. What the ref has shown is that impact is very much interdisciplinary by nature. A lot of different disciplines contribute to successful impact cases. You must think about the relation between an observable positive effect or whether a negative effect has been avoided, which might be more difficult to prove. You must consider, are there any unintended effects of the research? What we spent a lot of time talking about was whether we should have one or separate judgment panels. And finally, an interesting issue which has come up to the surface in the wake of the ref is the relation between research excellence and impact. There have been a few meta-studies that I've seen from the ref, and they are quite contradictory. It's hard to, at least I've not seen any evidence that there's a linear relationship between excellence and impact. So that's something to bear in mind as well. You could get a high score for impact, but not at all such a high score on the research quality, and vice versa. So then Paula asked me to say, what are there any recommendations to a small country from another small country? Well, These are the recommendations based on our experiences, and I would give them also to, I think, to a big country or to a university or to anyone who's interested in these things. You should decide whether research impact assessment should be a part of a research funding system or not. It's controversial. Research funding, performance-based research funding systems are controversial, very controversial in many places around the world. And if you base your research impact assessment system on a funding system, it may be a roadblock, so to say. It may stop the whole exercise. I would say that you should avoid a model based solely on indicators if you look into impact assessment. I don't say that you should avoid indicators, but I say that I would advise you to avoid a model solely based on indicators. Instead, use case studies or similar kind of narratives, but make sensible use of them. So, as I said, the British and Dutch models, if I may call it that, they are both similar and different, and both of them are interesting. But you can handle it in different ways. For the fourthly, don't just look at the research excellence framework. It's well known, and it's a success, at least in terms of performing an evaluation system, national evaluation system. But there are other systems in national level which are just as interesting they were just as interesting for us in Sweden, and maybe just as interesting for a country like Catalonia. And the standard evaluation protocol in the Netherlands or the engagement and impact module in the Australian ERA system. And finally, I would advise anyone to start in a small scale, not build the total system. For example, you could start the assessment on a research field level rather than a research area or subject level. So, thank you.
I think that in one of your initial slides you were talking about the politics of your country, you were opposing hypothesis 1 to hypothesis 2, which one was based on peer review, and the second one was based on indicators. No? Yes. I think that each one of them does not exclude the other one. And probably the combination, I think along your talk, probably you agree that combination of both is probably the worth. And here is interesting that in your last slide you are saying avoid the model of solely using indicators, no? Yeah. And I think that finally scientists have to be behind all the evaluations, and we have to talk to scientists. Scientists have to be involved in those evaluations, as well as other officers, other managers. But if you talk about management of science, we have to clearly include scientists. That's my point of view. Probably one of the agencies more important in the world, which is the NIH in the United States, is including and is mixing both either indicators or peer review evaluations, ending with the site visit, which is probably the most important aspect in an evaluation process.
Yeah. Thank you. I think my hypothesis about the political divide, so to say, based on my experiences from Sweden and also what I've heard about the debate in Australia. To comment on what you said, as far as I know, the recent introduction of a module in the Australian model is based both on indicators and narratives, and gives equal space to both of these issues. And I personally, I don't think that you should make the conflict controversy too big. And what I was trying to say was, at least in my country, part of it seems to be very political. And that's been part of our problem in implementing an impact agenda, is that it has been very politically charged.
Yeah, I have a question too. My question is a methodological issue. I would like to know, when you require documentation to the evaluation,
Yeah.
Do you ask for the impact expectation of the people or of the institutions who are going to be evaluated, or they just do not inform about anything? I mean, every 6 years, you measure the performance of the former years, but at the same time, you can ask for the expected impact that those research groups may have in the future. So I think that's important afterwards, to attribute impact to a certain type of research.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I would say yes and no in our proposal. In both our proposals, we have included, I think we had called it an impact statement, which are to include the strategies for achieving impact, but also how you plan to achieve more impact during the next period. So foresight, if you will. And I think it's important to have that in some part of the model. Then I think these things become much more difficult when they're supposed to lead to some attribution of funding, because then everything has to have a weight, doesn't it? So then a lot policymaking level wants to attribute much more weight to achieved impact than to the foreseen impact, so to say. Yeah. But that's a debate. I will not personally go too much into that debate. I think both elements are important. Yeah. Thank you.